Good morning, Senior Pride here. Today I'd like to address the issue of housing and how housing corporations and governments are taking advantage of seniors, older people, and persons with disabilities, and people living in poverty. All of us who don't have a great income now. For seniors and persons with disabilities who come from a decent income or have family support or these kinds of things, this may not seem like such a significant issue, but for many of us, it is an enormous issue. I speak, of course, from a Canadian perspective, specifically an Albertan perspective, but I believe this applies in many places to many people. In Canada, many decades ago, the government very foolishly decided to hand over the housing, the creation of housing, etc., to private corporations, to private businesses. So the rent controls, the ability to build decent housing at low cost was thrown away. Now, for these few big corporations, for these few huge businesses, this probably seemed like money falling from the sky, and it is essentially. Over the years, things have happened, like rent controls being loosened or removed, like when a new place goes up or a place is vacated and it goes on the market again, the rent can just be, it can be double, triple, whatever the landlord wants. For those of us living in supported housing, that creates trouble. First of all, in Alberta, for example, the government basically, while they're telling people we're doing all these things for seniors, in fact, they significantly slashed the budget for housing for seniors. They stopped building new supportive housing, despite the fact that the people that are older and are seniors, that population is growing every year, but they slashed the budget. So seniors housing, it's not being increased. So there are folks, for example, with dementia who are waiting 2 or more years to get into a housing program that's not even appropriate for them, just a space, any space. I'm in a building that is not designed, it's designed as independent living or aging in place. We have a lot of folks here with really significant cognitive decline or dementia. They are not faring well. But if they're moved out of here, there's nowhere for them to go. So they stay and bad things happen. And that is what it is in Alberta and many other places again, because governments are looking at seniors as a liability instead of an opportunity to develop their community. Yes, when people are declining, it can be very problematic. It can be problematic for them, it can be problematic for their families, it can be problematic for the community. But to leave people hanging, to leave people with dementia literally on the street, how does that work? And this is where we need to look at how we're approaching the fact that we do have an aging population. So, for instance, for those of us in low-income seniors housing, once we're in here, we can never leave, because the only place we would be able to go, because there's nothing we can afford, is literally the street. And we're seeing more and more people over 55, 60 who are on the street, some with significant health concerns and challenges, and they are being left to suffer. So those of us who are fortunate enough to get into even a very difficult situation feel like we can't move, feel like we can't say anything. We're stuck. We're trapped. I'm in a situation that is totally inappropriate for me, not because of decline or dementia, precisely the opposite, because some of the health issues I was confronting when I first got here, and to be honest, I took this place because I was in a short-term women's housing situation, and my next stop was the street as a person with a disability. So I kind of took it out of desperation. I don't belong here. I belong in a more independent kind of environment. But that won't happen as long as the Alberta government is looking at people in poverty with disabilities and or who are over 65 as simply a liability. Now, part of the problem it kind of extends. So part of the problem for many seniors or older people or people with disabilities is that the health system in Alberta, for example, has been completely decimated by the government on purpose. They want people to have a US style kind of approach to healthcare where lots of insurance, paying for things out of pocket. The reality is most Albertans don't have the money for that. We simply don't. Even if we did, we're Canadian, and Canadians grew up with a wonderful healthcare system. We paid into it for our taxes, and now we hear these and we got far more than we paid. Now we're hearing our governments, both provincially and federally, say things like, well, we're gonna cut your taxes by cutting support to the healthcare system. The fact is, if you've ever lived in the United States, and I've lived in 3 different locations in 3 different parts of the United States, the one thing that was consistent among all those places was that healthcare was just far too expensive. People would allow their health to degrade because they had no choice. They couldn't afford it. And that's what we're doing now in Alberta. So then because our health is declining, because we have no support, we end up on the waiting list for seniors housing, and then, of course, surprise, surprise, there is no housing because they've cut the budget to that. So we can be on that list for 2 more years, as I said. When we get in, we're usually in inappropriate housing. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. A friend of mine is in a building actually next door, owned by the same nonprofit corp, and it is like this building, independent, aging in place for folks that are doing well. Well, they are now bringing, as spaces open up, and that's usually due, unfortunately, to a passing, people are brought in who are already so far in cognitive decline that they can't take care of themselves. So they wheel them out to the meals in a wheelchair, and then they wheel them back, and these folks are basically just not living. They have no support, nothing other. If they're lucky, they're getting home care, and home care is not a well-organized program. It can be very problematic. When people do need it, even short-term, as I did, they don't get the right medications. They get the medications at the wrong times. They're basically left adrift. And I've experienced this personally. I've experienced some of the abuses that come with home care. So again, the budget's been cut. Don't blame the healthcare providers. They're trying. Blame the government. They are putting these people in a position that they have far too many patients with far too little time, and their pay is, it's corrupt what the government is doing. Now, that being said, what can we do about it? Well, I think we need to stand up as a community, as a province, as a country, as countries all over the world, and say this is not okay. We have an aging population. We want housing to be put in place, to be implemented, that will support healthy aging, not abuse. And right now, these private corps that own everything, they are abusing because they can, because governments are turning their faces away and saying, we're just not going to notice because, hey, we're getting the vote from these corporations. What they don't understand is there are enough of us that if we got up together and we said something and we started refusing to be taken advantage of, things would change. We have power. We need to use it. So in Alberta, if you are in improper housing, I know it's scary to speak up. When I do it, I'm pretty sure every time that I'm going to be out on the street. It hasn't happened yet. What they do is they just withdraw certain necessary services. So for instance, right now I have no access to transit. I can't get to the doctor. I can't get to medical appointments. Basic things that I need to do, like get to the bank for, most things I can do online, but there's a couple of things I actually need to go there for. Can't do it. They have literally restricted my movement. Okay, I get it. They're pissed off. I'm speaking up. But if I keep speaking up, at some point, they're going to realize, it's been 6 years. I think they're eventually going to realize, I'm not going to shut up. And maybe if others start to speak up, things will change. For instance, I'm in housing that is, the building is so old and has become so problematic. I mean, the whole time I've been here, this whole 6 years, they have never fixed the heating system. There was a huge flood a week ago or so. These things keep happening, but again, they're just kind of pushed aside because they can be, and because out of necessity. If they say something, if the government says, well, we have to close this building and move you into another building, there is no other building to move us into. We're all on the street because we can't afford, even those of us who are capable of living independently, we can't afford it. The rents are too high. So it's like a we'll just turn away kind of situation, and that is going to keep happening until people start speaking up. Now, for family members of older people or people with disabilities, you may think that your loved one is being cared for. They are not. And you need to speak up. And by the way, this will affect you in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. It will affect you. So if you don't speak up now, you're not just affecting your senior, you're affecting yourself. We need to speak up. We need to keep saying it. If enough of us say it, and we say it loudly, and we don't stop, things will change by necessity, because these people will realize, people in power will realize they don't have the power over us. We've stopped letting them. We have that much power. We have the power to make them change, but we have to do it en masse. And with that, I say adieu.